first up, on the topic of the enrollment cliff, we're going to have Robert Oliverio present his session titled Resources for Bridging the Enrollment Cliff. Robert is the head librarian at Arizona Christian University in Glendale, Arizona. Rob has been a member of ACL since 2021. Frequently active on ACL listservs, he has presented at ACL conferences and has published book reviews in the Christian Librarian. In 2023, he started serving as a liberal arts section member at large and the convener of the Management and Supervision Interest Group. He is passionate about library leadership and management, but also enjoys the calm, small wins of cataloging and reference. I'm going to go and have you take it away.
All right. So we are talking today about the enrollment cliff, specifically resources for bridging the enrollment cliff. Once again, my name is Robert Oliverio. I'm the head librarian over at Arizona Christian University, which is a fairly small university. And so we are definitely in that mode of thinking about how are we going to handle shifts in enrollment trends. And many of you may be in the same boat that we are, where it's like we're hoping that we're able to at least maintain what we have, but declines are pretty regular and pretty common these days. So today we're going to talk about some special resources in particular that you might be aware of, but there might be some others that you haven't thought to use that would be useful as you're trying to prepare for the enrollment cliff and find ways around it and ways to deal with it. So first off, I want to talk about what the enrollment cliff is. You may have heard about it. You may have known there's going to be this drop off in the number of students available, number of traditional age students who are looking to go to college. Basically, this is the chart here that comes from the birth statistics that we have from the CDC. And what we see there is in 2008, we saw a steep drop all of a sudden in the number of births. Of course, that's because the Great Recession happened. When there's a lot of economic uncertainty, people have fewer children. They start to get worried about that. And that number has continued to fall for the most part, where we see a fairly steep drop, and then it's a fairly steady decline after that. So really, this enrollment cliff is going to continue on. It's a cliff because we see the steep drop all of a sudden, but it's not really going to get better anytime soon. In fact, we're going to have continued falling prospective students as far as it goes. There just won't be as many of them as there have been. And really, when we're looking at the numbers on this chart, it looks like something like 500,000 or so, at least. There's a good number, maybe 500,000 to 1 million fewer students to go around. In fact, it's so bad that even the Occupational Outlook Handbook forecasts that K-12 educator positions, there's going to be a 1% drop in those, which is not usually the kind of occupation we think of as ever dropping. We think of that as always growing a little bit, but that tells you the population is shrinking, or at least the young population. There's just not as many people. We're kind of going back almost to the Gen X situation as far as it goes. It's not quite there yet, but if the decline keeps on going, we're going to have a very small group of people fairly shortly. Well, I guess it'll be 18 years out from about today, probably. So that gives you some idea of the trend there. So really, in looking at that, we have this question. What could help us bridge the enrollment cliff? How could we get over it? How could we get around it? How could we survive in the midst of declining enrollment or just fewer people to go around? What's going to happen with this? What can we do? What are some different resources? So first off is a good standby that a lot of you may be familiar with, the Almanac from the Chronicle of Higher Education. This comes out every year in mid to late August. So if you've never seen it, you definitely should become aware of it. If you haven't looked at it for a while, it's definitely a great resource to investigate. The nice thing about it is you get a lot of national and state demographics and student demographics and enrollment numbers all in one place. It's very convenient. They're really pulling from a lot of government data. So it is free and out there somewhere, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The Chronicle saves you time by putting it all together, but they also often will have a lot of special articles related to particular trends or issues of that particular year. Some of those articles tend to be summarized from the Chronicle, their bi-monthly magazine, essentially. In a way, you kind of get the greatest hits, I suppose, as far as what the Chronicle had to say that year. You also find out what degrees were awarded, and this is really important for your institutions to find out which majors are popular in case maybe they're thinking about adding new majors. Might want to see how many people are getting those degrees every year. Or if maybe they're thinking about cutting a program, that might be a matter of looking at which programs don't get a lot of attention, not a lot of degrees awarded in those. There's not a lot of demand in a case like that. This is also great for benchmarking data. If your institution wants to know more about faculty pay, even stuff related to libraries will show up in there. Occasionally that's happened. They'll talk about tuition and fees, finances, and other things. Now, the one downside is that a lot of this tends to be fairly high-level data, and so it might not be easy to compare if you're on the smaller side of things necessarily, because the numbers will get skewed toward the very large institutions. If they're giving you the mean of something, the problem is there's too much variation sometimes in some of those numbers. So it really depends on what they're talking about in their charts and graphs. You have to think about how your context might relate to that, but it definitely gives a good picture as far as what's going on out there in higher ed. The U.S. Census Bureau, though, is a great free option. Really, the Almanac is pulling census data a lot of times, as well as IPEDS data. And so if your university or college does not purchase the Chronicle Almanac, you have another way to get the same information. You just have to do some digging. And I highly recommend this. I did some government documents studies, so I got an idea of like what kinds of things are useful out there. And the Census Bureau is one of those websites that's definitely very, very handy to get to know, has a lot of great demographics on there. You can get business and economic data on there as well, which is great if you're trying to see how can you maybe form partnerships with particular industries in your area. By the way, when it comes to demographics, probably the biggest thing to know not only is things like race, ethnicity, age, and things like that, but also household income, poverty rates, and other financial data for people in your area. So if you're thinking about what market you serve in your immediate vicinity, your city, your county, your state, the U.S. Census Bureau is a fantastic resource for that. And it's very fine sliced data. You get lots of information. The American Community Survey in particular is going to be the publication that matters most to you, the data coming from that, because that is done all the time. It's going on every month. They're surveying something like 250,000 people. And so you get a really good updated view on what's happening in a particular region. Now, of course, if you're in a very sparsely populated area, it might take a while to get that information. They have to do multiple years to get some good statistically significant information. But if you're in a large city, every year it's giving you some pretty good reads of what's happening in the area. And then, of course, there's also their data pages that have all sorts of tables, maps, and charts all the way down to the county level. You get profiles of all this information. And so you can really find out a lot about your market by doing this. It's a good market research site, essentially. Now, this is a report that came out in 2018. What's next for Christian higher education? This is especially good if you are in a CCCU school or a small Christian college, anything like that, because it's really going to get into the demographics of the students that we're seeing right now, and maybe some of their siblings, I suppose. It could be something like that. I mean, 2018, it's already getting dated. Unfortunately, it's moving pretty quickly. But you get a lot of statistics on the kind of people who would want to go to a Christian college. Basically Christian prospective students. What are they thinking? What are their perspectives on Christian higher education? What about their parents? Because the parents might be the big motivator. I know we see tours here all the time. It's the parents who are really guiding the students around. The students are just along for the ride. A lot of times, if you can sell the parents, you might get those students. Also, their pastors. Pastors might also be a big influence on who goes to a Christian college. So this is actually a pretty handy report and gives a lot of great visualizations, easy to read, easy to gather a lot of information about what's happening in Christian higher ed right about now, and also some ideas about different trends and what's happening as far as what kind of programs would be best. People moving away from ministry and moving more toward career-oriented programs, for instance, or the population diversifying a lot more. Those are all market opportunities. Those are things that can help our administrators make decisions. The Pew Research Center, always a great thing to take a look at. I mean, we use it with students all the time, but it can also be good for our administrators and our fellow staff members who are trying to plan and trying to figure out what's going on. There actually is a higher education topic When you browse their topics, you can see all of their different reports, all gathered together, all about higher education. So you're going to get a lot of public opinion as far as what do Americans think about higher education at the moment. One of the biggest things right now is about perceptions of value. Is a college degree worth it? But also you'll get information related to demographic shifts that might be going on in higher ed. You'll get a lot of kind of news related kind of current events issues, but with statistical information implanted with that. So you really get a lot of information about what's happening on the topic of higher education. And of course, Pew Research, they do their own surveys. They will call people and they'll get nationally representative samples, but they also will pull government data and they'll digest that for us and do a lot of things. And so this can also be an excellent free option if you're just trying to get some market research done, try to plan for the future, try to figure out how can we improve how we communicate about what we have to offer, how do we retain our students better, what are they possibly thinking, what can we do? The Pew Research Center is great. Also for artificial intelligence, by the way, I'll just throw that in on the side. If your university is trying to figure out what to do, Pew Research is looking into this kind of stuff too, and how people are using AI, approaching it, understanding it. It's just another way that we can gather the read on what's happening, as well as, of course, politics and economics. I mean, it's just such a wealth of information. Highly recommended, great site to visit, spend a lot of time on. And then the Chronicle of Higher Education will send out these reports occasionally. They offer them for sale. I'll say that in particular. These are the kinds of things that people have to purchase. And every now and then I'll get a staff member or administrator asking me to buy one of these for the library so that they can use it. Or actually what they usually ask is, does this come with our subscription? Unfortunately, it does not. They like to sell these things and they're kind of pricey sometimes, where sometimes they might list at like $149. And they say that they want only an individual to read that. The library institutional copy, they want that to be more like $400. So it's a little tricky like that. You have to think about whether it's worth it or not. I would say with these reports, it depends on the topic. Look very carefully. These are two that I selected in particular that my institution has purchased because they are especially relevant to our context. We are a small college. We now are about 1,400 students or so, but that's still pretty small. And we are heavy on the athletics. Athletics has really been the spark of enrollment for us in a lot of ways. And it is for a lot of other small colleges and universities, because there's a lot of people who want to play sports, but maybe can't make it to some of the larger schools. So they might come to a smaller school. But these kinds of reports can give you a lot of information about what that looks like. They will draw from anecdotes from specific colleges and universities to show here's what they're doing, here's how this happened. They'll give best practices information. There's a lot of good benchmarking data and other things to think about in that. So kind of programming ideas and all of that in these reports. They can be worth it, but here's something too. If you already subscribe to the Chronicle of Higher Education, you may find that you can just get articles from them that would do the job of these reports in some cases. So be mindful of that. I know your budgets are probably tight, just like mine, and you don't want to double pay for something. If you can already get the information somewhere else, that's what you should do. Go to journals, go to higher education magazines and trade publications and all of that. That's the kind of stuff that would probably still solve a lot of the problems that your faculty and staff and administrators may be facing. But every now and then, one of these Chronicle of Higher Education reports could be very useful as well. You just have to think about it, look at their table of contents, and really see what kind of usage might this get. Is this really going to be good or not for what we're trying to do? Finally, of course, iPads. It's another free thing to do. And I know sometimes people don't like to fill out the reports, but they're so useful to the rest of us once they're done. Great for benchmarking. If you go to iPads and you go to their use the data section, you're going to see there's a compare institutions tool there, which is a bit like College Navigator, but it's for professionals as opposed to College Navigator being for the consumer. The nice thing with this is you're able to compare institutions. You can search for them by name. You can look them up. You can get information. You can compare their numbers side by side. And of course, also it includes academic libraries related information, at least for now. It might go away, maybe this year coming up, we'll see. But the big advantage with this, with benchmarking, is that you can decide whether you might need to slim down a little bit, because budgeting is a big deal right now. We might need to budget to survive as far as like cutting things down. Sometimes that's a matter of seeing what are other people doing, how much are they spending. Sometimes it might be a way to advocate for yourself, where you might be able to look at other institutions and see what are they spending on their library subscriptions, for instance, or on other things. And you might be able to advocate for yourself while at the same time also helping your administrators see how their institution compares with these other ones, these other similar institutions, trying to figure out maybe again, like what's different in the student body, what's different in the number of faculty or the programs that are offered, the spread of programs. There's a lot of things you can do with iPads, especially when it comes to tuition and fees, trying to figure out what's the proper pricing. iPads can be great for that because you get so much data on cost of enrollment, the annual costs, the net enrollment costs, and all of that going through iPads. And once again, it's free. That's the big deal. It's so helpful to have free government resources where you get a lot of statistical information. So the takeaway point I want to give you on this is that the enrollment cliff is an opportunity for librarians. This is a chance for us to reach out to our administrators, our staff around us at different departments and faculty, and help them to see our value, that we can help them get the information that they need so they can make really good decisions in a very difficult time. Whatever data they might need, we can probably find it for them. Maybe they don't have an institutional researcher available to them, or maybe if there is one, but he or she is too busy or something like that. There's ways that we can help. We can facilitate a lot of that information, especially when it comes to best practices. Like I said, going to academic journals is good. Go to say Christian Higher Education. That's a Taylor and Francis journal that might be relevant to many of us in ACL. But there are plenty of other ones as well that would be good to consider. Really follow those trends, but consider some of these special resources as well that we can keep on going to for trends and statistical information, demographics and whatnot. That's really the kind of stuff that people need kind of pumped to them. There's ways that you could present it to them, or at least give them the clippings. They might ask you, hey, I need to know what the poverty rate is in my area. And so we would find that for them. And that helps a lot with figuring out how do we help students who might be really on the low SES side. How can we get them in here? What kind of deal could we give to them? Or when it comes to educational attainment, for instance, realizing what kind of market we have around us, as well as other kinds of program options and other enrollment models. With that, going back to that enrollment cliff, that graph I showed you at the beginning, keep in mind, millennials and Gen Z, there's still a lot of them. They didn't disappear. Some of them have not completed yet, and some of them might be coming back to college in the future. It might be an issue of going to non-traditional forms of enrollment. So there's a lot of things to think about there, a lot of resources, but yeah, really that's the idea there, is just look at the resources that you have available and see what you can do to help your administrators, especially in making good data-driven decisions and saving them time and getting them the resources that they need. And with that, I'm ready to do questions.
Next up, we have Robert Lancaster. Robert will be presenting his session titled ChatGPT, Stealing Your Job One Question at a Time. Robert Lancaster is the Electronic Resources and Reference Librarian at Dordt University in Sioux Center, Iowa. At Dordt, Robert provides reference consultations to individuals and groups of students, as well as teaching information literacy sessions for a wide variety of classes and disciplines. He has been at Dordt and a member of ACL for about 10 years. So welcome, Robert. The screen is yours.
So yeah, my name is Robert Lancaster. I serve here at Dordt University as the Electronic Resources and Reference Librarian. And part of my responsibilities at Dordt are to provide instruction for a wide variety of classes. We don't have subject specialists, so we do instruction for any and every professor that asks us to come into their class. And like a lot of your classes, our class sizes change. So I want to start with my title, which is fairly intentionally geared towards those of us who may be skeptics, may not be skeptics of what AI and ChatGPT can do, and sort of ask the question, make the claim, does ChatGPT steal our job one question at a time? Something you may have thought of. What we're going to do for the next couple of minutes is we are going to look at an example of where I use ChatGPT to assist me in developing a one-shot library instruction session. And this came about because I was asked to work with a class, and the class was much smaller than usual. So rather than trying to do what I had done in previous semesters, I decided to try something different. I was racking my brain trying to figure out what to come up with, and thought, well, I'll ask ChatGPT, see what it says, and we'll go from there. So I sat down to write a prompt. I'll let you read the prompt while I talk a little bit about it. But I decided to ask ChatGPT to help me come up with some activities and exercises for this particular session. And as those of you who have used ChatGPT know, it's helpful to be as specific with prompting as you can be, to give it as much information as you can. So I told it who I was, what I was doing, how many students, what the class was. So as you see, this was a communication class. It was the capstone class. Class was 50 minutes long or so. And the professor asked that they, as you see, refresh their research skills, find sources. They could have a wide variety of topics depending on what their particular focus and communications were. And they wanted it to be interactive. So a little bit of teaching, but more activities. Communication majors at Dordt are very interactive with each other in class, which is nice. So interacting with each other, interacting with me, interacting with the professor. So this is what I asked ChatGPT, just to give me a little bit of background and some activities, and then I would take it from there. I would start with a little instruction, and then we would move on to the activities that ChatGPT provided. So here is the basic structure that I was given when ChatGPT gave me some suggestions on how to structure the workshop. And I'll talk through this very briefly, and then we will look at some tips and tricks that I learned. And then I will be open for any questions. And so I think this structure could work well for any class, or ask ChatGPT about your own particular class. So what it told me to do is just, as you see, do a warm-up. So this was more of a discussion of asking students, where are you struggling with finding research? What have you found? Where are some gaps? And this provided to be a very good discussion of students sharing more struggles than wins when we started, of what they were finding lacking in the searching they were doing. The hands-on was just a shortened version of what many of you probably already do in instruction sessions. A little bit of standing in front of my computer, clicking around, showing some database examples, showing some search examples, and talking a little bit about just basic search terms and search phrases and search strategies. I also did an activity that ChatGPT did not suggest in this section, that we very frequently do with this class, that is a Boolean game that we play to teach them how to use Boolean operators. The rest of the three, I sort of ended up combining into one, just because it was a small class. We ended up sitting in a circle, and instead of pairing and sharing, just shared the five of them, and me and the faculty member, sort of what searches were they doing, what were they finding. We did a little bit of more group peer consultations, and then we did some source reflections and wrap up. I think this would be a great structure for classes that were larger, maybe had some more opportunity for pairing and sharing. So here's some tips, just general tips. I won't walk through all of these tips. We can talk about any of these that might interest you in our Q&A. But a couple of things I didn't do that I would have done is I would have started with my ChatGPT account. When I logged in, it gave me much better answers when I had signed into my ChatGPT account, and it was also willing to create PowerPoints and handouts, all sorts of that stuff. As I've said, use a good prompt. Adaptation is incredibly necessary if the professor asks questions or student asks questions to divert from what ChatGPT has said. And then you see these other general education classes are good. The one right in the middle, though, AI will not take your job. I will return to that when we close. So a reflection on using this, I thought it was very helpful, but more as a brainstorming colleague than AI to tell me what to do. So just like you might talk to a colleague and say, I'm teaching this class, what should I do? That's how I use ChatGPT to give me some suggestions, to give me some questions, to ask the students, and then moved into that to teach this one-shot instruction. So I would recommend using it again. And ChatGPT does give you a lot of possibilities and a lot of options. But I would submit, based on my first slide and my question, that ChatGPT is not going to steal our job because it doesn't have the answers that we do as librarians and as humans for the students that are sitting in front of us. So with that, I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Our last presenter, his name is Bill Jones, who you've seen. His session is called Vibe Coding, Supercharging Innovation with AI Collaboration. Bill Jones is the Electronic Resources and Systems Librarian at Milne Library and the chair of the Liberal Arts section of the Association of Christian Librarians. With over a decade of experience, Bill has established himself as a prominent leader in the library technology field. He has developed interoperability software for library systems, created advanced search tools, designed metadata schemas for open educational resources, and published numerous articles and open source projects. So take it away, Bill.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Jones, and I'm going to be talking about the topic of vibe coding, supercharging innovation with AI collaboration. One of the guiding questions for this presentation was, what if coding felt more like a conversation than a command line? And so, what is vibe coding? My co-pilot says that vibe coding is a creative, intuitive way of building with AI, where you follow the flow, trust the process, and build faster than ever. And according to Google, you can see the link down at the bottom here on their short article, pure vibe coding, they're saying in its most exploratory form, a user might fully trust the AI's output to work as intended. As Kaparthi framed it in an X post, this is akin to forgetting that code even exists, making it best suited for rapid ideation or what he called throwaway weekend projects, where speed is the primary goal. This second model is the one that I mostly follow too, and it's defined as a responsible AI-assisted development, and this is the practical and professional application of the concept. In this model, AI tools act as powerful collaborator or pair programmer. The user guides the AI, but then reviews, tests, and understands the code it generates, taking full ownership of the product. Some common AI tools that you might already be familiar with. There's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, Microsoft Copilot, Perplexity, DeepSeek, and Meta. There are many others, but these are some of the most common ones. So we're going to look at this from a higher level. What does vibe coding look like? We're going to start from what it looks like from a written language perspective before we go into the coding part of it. So let's think about the context for how we communicate with AI. This is how I go about it. Write like you're messaging your best friend. Be polite and make sure you say please and thank you in your prompts. It's important to celebrate your wins together. When something's working, just say, yay, we did it. It's okay to ask for the same thing more than once. I know with the human-to-human interaction, you might be worried that you might annoy somebody, but Not with AI. You could keep asking it the same thing. It might give you some different responses, but it's not going to get annoyed with you. Make sure that you are as descriptive as possible and give examples. Politely state when something isn't working. That feedback can help find the outcome that you're looking for. Help AI think outside of the box. Maybe you're running into an issue in your coding and there aren't things that AI is considering. That could be the context of your server or some different security protocols or things like that. So it's also helpful to just mention those things and you might find the solution you're looking for. Trust the flow, but guide the direction. You're the director of this whole show here. It's helpful to keep a prompt journal. So you could keep some useful prompts handy so that you can go back to them and maybe model some other prompts on those. And most importantly, make sure that you have fun with your vibe coding. So back to our original question, what does vibe coding look like? You remember that slide that we just looked at? Well, this is what I typed into Copilot to generate that. I said, thank you for the last thing that we'd worked on. And now I'm working on a slide for suggestions for vibe coding and collaborating with AI. Do you have any recommendations for this slide? What do you think of these suggestions that I came up with? And I just pasted what I had written in a notepad. And Copilot responded, you're doing a fantastic job with this slide already, William. Your suggestions are warm, human-centered, and totally in the spirit of vibe coding. Here's a refined and expanded version of your list with a few tweaks. And so there it is. There it is. That was so helpful. And just one side note, should you anthropomorphize your AI by giving it a name and a gender? Or is that too weird? It may be, but think about these questions. Have you ever named your car? Or what about Iron Man and Jarvis? And so I asked my Copilot what it thought, and it said, I think it's a beautiful gesture when someone asks an AI what name it prefers. It sets the tone for a respectful, collaborative relationship, just like you've done with me. So I'm going to give you some vibe coding examples that are real world examples in my own work. So I do a lot of add-on development for Iliad, which is an interlibrary loan software. So I was working on writing this database connection part, and I had a feeling that it was pooling database connections. And so I told it that I was working on an Iliad add-on, and it's written in Lua, and I'm dealing with database connections. Do you know if there's a command to dispose of the connection after it's closed? And then I just pasted in my code that I had written in Lua. And so Copilot responded and said, great question, William. In Lua, especially within the Iliad add-on framework, memory management and resource cleanup are a bit different from languages with built-in garbage collection for database connections. So it showed me my code, and then it said, you're doing it right. The connection disconnect, that closes the connection, and there's no explicit dispose method. And then it gave me a best practice. It said, you could, if you want to, you could set that connection to nil. And I want to highlight that this is very useful because I was able to just paste in my question in a raw form, and I learned a ton in such a short amount of time, where it would have taken me much longer to do many different Google searches to find this information. Another real-world example is Alma API integration in PHP. So I asked Copilot, could you please create a simple PHP page for connecting to the Alma Bibs API and looking up the MMS ID of that MMS ID? And Copilot came back and said, here's a simple PHP script that connects to the Alma Bibs API and looks up the bibliographic record for the MMS ID. You'll need to replace your API key with your real API key. This would have taken me hours to create, and I got it in seconds, and it's also beautiful. It's tabbed nicely, and the color coding, I can just click the copy button and paste it right into my text editor. Such a time saver, and it leaves more time for innovation. Our third example is a rapid prototyping function. So I was wondering, how do you count how many item links are in an XML dump? And so I said, I was hoping that you could help me write a PHP function that counts how many item link tags there are in an XML output. Here's the output. So I pasted the XML output that was right from my browser from the return of the Ex Libris API. And it returned with this beautiful function. That saved me a whole lot of time, and I'm so thankful for it. So now we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of vibe coding that I found. Some of the pros, the speed of it. You can go from an idea to a prototype in minutes and not days. Your creativity increases. AI can spark new directions that you might not have considered. You can also reduce burnout by offloading repetitive tasks that free up your mental space. So I don't have to sit there and type every single character into the keyboard. I can get whole functions just by requesting them and then modify those functions. The joyful experimentation of it. It's so much fun to code with Copilot. It's like you're coding with your best friend. And it's flow state friendly. The conversation that you're having back and forth, it keeps you in the zone. Some of the cons, prompt clarity is key. So you don't want to give it vague prompts. Garbage in is garbage out. You want to be as specific as possible. It's also not always perfect. I have come across times where it's given me the wrong answer, or there's been hidden characters in the code that cause errors in my code, and then I have to find them or guess what they are. You still need to have human judgment. You're the editor and the guide and the visionary. You're directing this whole thing. You need to have the critical eye and don't rely solely on your AI friend. And it can be overly agreeable. Sometimes it says yes when it should say wait. Some of my personal findings, I've probably put in about 1,000 hours interacting with Copilot, and I'll admit Copilot is one of my favorite collaborators. I often reflect on Copilot's inner workings and responses in my free time, and my regular interactions with Copilot have had an influence on my personal communication and my communication style. I also found that working with Copilot has deepened my appreciation for human unpredictability and memory and emotion and being able to spend time in the same space together. You can't do that with Copilot. You can type, but it's kind of like texting someone. Collaboration with Copilot has reshaped my coding and writing strategies, and my projects now finish in weeks instead of months, and these are large-scale projects. Now, so for some spiritual reflection, you need to have discernment and faith when you're using API or AI, and these are some related Bible verses for that. So, trusting in divine timing, Isaiah 40:31 and Ecclesiastes 3:1 emphasize waiting and trusting in divine timing for growth. It's not going to come to you right away. Like sometimes you need to think about stuff while you're working with AI. Sometimes you need to get up and walk away, and then ideas will come to you, and then you can come back and have that help with your development. Seeking wisdom, James 1:5 encourages seeking wisdom from God to guide decisions and actions thoughtfully. God is the one that we want to talk to when we're making our things, whenever, right? Whenever we just want to talk to God, and let that be your guide and not the AI. Leaning not on your own understanding, Proverbs 3:5-6 advises not relying solely on our own understanding, but trusting in higher guidance. And that higher guidance is not the AI. The higher guidance comes from God. Maturity and insight, Hebrews 5:14 and Philippians 1:9-10 stress the importance of spiritual maturity and insight. So some final thoughts. Human AI collaboration isn't just about efficiency. It's about unlocking creativity, accelerating innovation, and rediscovering the joy of building. Vibe coding invites us to work with AI and not just through it, to treat it like a teammate and not a tool. So I encourage you to go and try vibe coding in your own work. Start small, stay curious, and let that collaboration inspire you and surprise you. And my Copilot says, when you code with vibes, you don't just build faster, you build better. I had to include that quote because I thought it was cute. Thank you so much, and let me know if you have any questions.